The Duke of Thornfield stood in the vestry of the grand cathedral and attempted to calm the trembling in his hands. He was about to marry the woman he loved, a development that had seemed impossible only 2 years ago, but that now felt like the inevitable conclusion to a story that had taken him through desperation, heartbreak, and ultimately redemption. His bride was Catherine, a woman he had met while traveling through the countryside, a woman of no particular fortune or family connection, a woman whose primary distinction was that she possessed the kind of character and intelligence that had captured his heart completely. He had pursued her with single-minded determination for months, had proposed to her with absolute certainty that she was the woman he was meant to spend his life with, and had spent the past weeks planning a wedding that would demonstrate to all of society that he did not care what they thought of his choice. The wedding itself was not traditionally grand. It was held in the afternoon rather than the morning. It was attended by those who genuinely cared about the Duke, rather than those who sought to benefit from their connection to him. It was organized in a way that suggested the Duke's rebellion against society's expectations had reached its culmination. Everything about this wedding said that the Duke was marrying for love rather than for advantage, and he was prepared to face whatever consequences that decision might bring. The cathedral was filled with flowers, pale roses, and white lilies, arranged with careful artistry. The pews were lined with guests, who had been carefully selected by the Duke and Catherine together. The organ music filled the space with the kind of solemnity that suggested something significant was occurring. Everything was perfect. Everything was precisely as it should be. And then everything changed. As the Duke waited at the altar, as the moment approached when Catherine would walk down the aisle and his life would officially transform, the great doors at the back of the cathedral burst open. A woman in a wedding dress stood in the doorway, and the collective gasp that arose from the assembled guests was audible enough to echo through the vaulted ceiling. The Duke felt his entire body go cold. He recognized the woman immediately. He would have recognized her anywhere, in any circumstance, under any condition. It was Victoria, his ex-girlfriend, the woman he had been engaged to marry 5 years ago before everything had fallen apart. She was dressed in a white wedding gown that was far more elaborate than Catherine's modest dress. She was wearing an expression that contained something between triumph and desperation. She was walking down the aisle as though she had every right to do so, as though this was her wedding and not Catherine's, as though the Duke had been waiting for her rather than for the woman who was now standing at the altar with an expression of shock and confusion. The Duke did not know what to do. He did not know what to say. He could feel the eyes of every guest in the cathedral boring into him, waiting to see how he would respond to this extraordinary disruption. He could feel Catherine's presence beside him, could sense her confusion, and her growing understanding that something was terribly wrong. He could feel the weight of 5 years of history suddenly crashing down upon him, threatening to destroy everything he had built with Catherine in the past 2 years. Victoria reached the altar and stopped directly before the Duke. She placed her hand on his arm and spoke words that were clearly intended for him, but that were loud enough for most of the cathedral to hear. She said she had come to save him from making the worst mistake of his life. She said she had come because she could not allow him to marry a woman he had met in the countryside, a woman of no standing, a woman who would never be able to provide him with what he deserved. She said she had come because she still loved him and because she believed he still loved her. She said she had come because his engagement to her had been broken 5 years ago by circumstances beyond their control, and she had never stopped believing that they were meant to be together. The Duke felt as though the floor was shifting beneath his feet. He looked at Victoria and attempted to formulate some response. He looked at Catherine and saw the pain in her expression, saw the moment when she began to understand that the Duke's past contained complications that he had not fully explained to her. The vicar, clearly bewildered by this turn of events, stood silently, awaiting some kind of direction. The guests whispered to each other in shocked tones. The entire carefully constructed moment had been obliterated. In the silence that followed Victoria's declaration, Catherine spoke. Her voice was quiet but steady. She asked the Duke whether what Victoria had said was true. She asked whether he was still in love with Victoria. She asked whether he had been in love with Victoria when he met Catherine, when he had pursued her, when he had proposed to her. The Duke opened his mouth to respond, but before he could, Victoria spoke again. She told Catherine that she had no business being here, that she should remove herself from the altar immediately, that the Duke was not available to marry her. She told Catherine that she and the Duke had a history that transcended anything Catherine could possibly understand, that they had been promised to each other through years of companionship and shared experience, that they belonged together. Victoria's words hung in the air like a curse. The Duke found himself confronted with the reality that the woman he had been engaged to marry 5 years ago had never truly accepted that their engagement had been broken. She had never truly accepted that he had moved on. She had never truly accepted that he had found someone else. She had come to stop his wedding because she refused to acknowledge that he no longer loved her. The Duke looked at Catherine and saw tears in her eyes. He saw betrayal in her expression. He saw the moment when she began to question everything that had passed between them. He knew that he had only moments to explain, to provide context, to make Catherine understand that the man she had agreed to marry was not the man that Victoria was describing. He knew that if he did not speak immediately and with absolute clarity, he would lose her. So he turned to Victoria and told her the truth. He told her that yes, he had been engaged to her 5 years ago. He told her that yes, they had shared years of companionship, but he told her that the engagement had been broken for excellent reasons. He told her that she had broken the engagement, not him. He told her that she had broken it because she had discovered that she did not actually love him, because she had been marrying him for social advantage and for family obligation rather than for genuine affection. He told her that she had told him directly that she could not proceed with the marriage because she could not spend her life with a man she did not truly love. He told her that he had accepted her decision with grace because he was mature enough to understand that no one should be forced into a marriage they did not want. He told her that he had spent the 5 years since that broken engagement rebuilding himself, reconstructing his understanding of love and partnership, learning what it meant to truly connect with another person. He told her that he had discovered, in Catherine, a woman who loved him not for his title or his wealth, but for who he actually was. He told her that Catherine had seen him at his most vulnerable and most broken, and had chosen to stand beside him anyway. He told her that Catherine was the woman he wanted to marry, and that he would marry her regardless of Victoria's objections. Victoria's expression shifted from triumph to something approaching hysteria. She told him that he was making a terrible mistake. She told him that he would regret this decision for the rest of his life. She told him that she was far more suitable for him than a woman of no standing could possibly be. She told him that he would come to understand that marrying Catherine was the greatest error he had ever made. The Duke felt compassion for Victoria in that moment. He recognized that she was suffering, that her appearance at his wedding was not an act of malice but an act of desperation. He recognized that she had convinced herself over the past 5 years that their broken engagement had been a mistake, that she had convinced herself that he was pining for her, that she had constructed an entire fantasy in which he would still love her despite her rejection of him. He spoke to her with kindness, but with absolute firmness. He told her that he wished her well. He told her that he hoped she would find genuine love with someone who loved her truly. He told her that she was welcome to remain in the cathedral for the wedding if she wished, but that nothing she said or did could change his decision. He told her that this wedding would proceed, and that he and Catherine would begin their life together as planned. He told her that he hoped that over time she would come to accept this reality and move forward with her own life. Victoria stared at him for a long moment. Then she turned and walked out of the cathedral. Her elaborate wedding dress trailed behind her as she moved down the aisle. She did not look back. The doors closed behind her with a finality that suggested she was closing a chapter of her own life as well. After Victoria's departure, there was a profound silence in the cathedral. The Duke looked at Catherine and saw that her expression had changed. The pain and betrayal that had been visible moments earlier had been replaced by something else. She reached out and took his hand. She told him that she had needed to hear him say those things, needed to hear him articulate why he had chosen her over his past, needed to understand that his decision to marry her was based on genuine conviction rather than momentary impulse. The Duke told her that he had been afraid that Victoria's appearance would destroy everything they had built together. He told her that he had been terrified that Catherine would walk away from him because his past was more complicated than he had fully explained. He told her that he loved her more than he had ever loved anyone, and that her presence in his life was the greatest gift he had ever received. Catherine squeezed his hand and told him that she was not going anywhere. She told him that she had heard the truth in his voice when he defended her. She told him that she understood that they all carried complicated pasts, but that what mattered was the present moment and the future they chose to build together. The vicar cleared his throat and asked whether they were ready to proceed with the ceremony. Catherine and the Duke exchanged a look that communicated perfect understanding, perfect acceptance, perfect love. They both responded affirmatively. The ceremony proceeded exactly as it had been planned, with the exception that it now carried the weight of extraordinary events that had tested it and that it had survived. When the Duke kissed his bride, the gesture was not merely ceremonial. It was a declaration that he had chosen her not, in spite of the complications of his past, but with full awareness of those complications, and with the conviction that she was worth any difficulty that past might create. The reception that followed was strange in the way that gatherings can be strange when an extraordinary event has just occurred. The guests talked about Victoria's appearance constantly. They speculated about whether she would return. They wondered what her motivations had been. They questioned whether the wedding had actually gone forward or whether some other outcome had occurred. But the Duke and Catherine paid no attention to these conversations. They danced together with the kind of focus that suggested nothing else in the world mattered. They spoke to each other with the kind of intimacy that transcended the public setting. They created, in short, a space in which they were entirely present with each other and entirely absent from the social drama surrounding them. It was late evening when the Duke's friend and closest adviser, Lord Ashford, pulled him aside and told him something that explained Victoria's appearance and that changed the Duke's entire understanding of the situation. Lord Ashford told him that Victoria had not simply decided randomly to appear at his wedding in a white dress. She had been planning it for months. She had been orchestrating it with the help of the Duke's distant cousin, a man who had always resented the Duke's inheritance of the title and the wealth that came with it. The cousin had been providing Victoria with information about the Duke's relationship with Catherine. The cousin had been encouraging her in her delusion that the Duke would respond to her appearance by abandoning Catherine. The cousin had been attempting to create circumstances that would humiliate the Duke publicly and that would throw his life into chaos. The cousin had been hoping that if the Duke's wedding was destroyed in a sufficiently dramatic fashion, he could leverage the situation to damage the Duke's standing in society and perhaps to position himself as a more suitable heir to the title. Lord Ashford had discovered this conspiracy only that morning and had debated whether to tell the Duke before the wedding or whether to allow the wedding to proceed without this information. In the end, he had decided not to tell the Duke, believing that the truth would emerge and that the Duke was strong enough to handle it. The Duke felt a complicated mixture of emotions upon learning this information. He felt anger at his cousin's manipulation. He felt pity for Victoria that she had been manipulated into appearing at his wedding. He felt gratitude for Lord Ashford's wisdom in not burdening him with this knowledge before the ceremony. Most importantly, he felt profound certainty that his marriage to Catherine was exactly what he wanted and exactly what he needed. The months that followed the wedding were characterized by the Duke and Catherine establishing their life together while also dealing with the consequences of Victoria's appearance at the wedding. Society was fascinated by the drama of it all. Some condemned Victoria as a woman scorned. Some condemned the Duke's cousin as a scheming villain. Some praised Catherine as a woman who had stood her ground in the face of extraordinary circumstances. Some questioned whether the Duke's marriage would actually last, given the complications of his past. Catherine found herself the subject of intense scrutiny. She found herself questioned about her background, her family, her motivations for marrying the Duke. She found herself defended publicly by women who had come to admire her for her strength and her authenticity. She found herself becoming, in her own way, a figure of some social significance. The Duke and Catherine worked deliberately to transform the trauma of the wedding day into something meaningful. They decided to use their position and their resources to establish an organization designed to help women who found themselves in situations similar to Victoria's, women who had allowed society's expectations to override their own authentic desires, women who had been trained to believe that their value was determined by their romantic connection to a man. They created programs designed to help women understand that they were complete human beings, regardless of their romantic status. They created opportunities for women to pursue education and careers independent of marriage. They created, in short, a movement designed to challenge the very structures that had nearly destroyed the Duke's wedding day. Victoria, after her dramatic appearance at the wedding, disappeared from London for several months. When she eventually returned, she appeared to have undergone a profound transformation. She sought out Catherine and requested a meeting. The meeting took place in a quiet garden, away from the public eye. Victoria told Catherine that she had spent the months since the wedding reflecting on her life and her choices. She told Catherine that she had come to understand that she had broken her engagement to the Duke not because she could not love him, but because she could not love herself. She told Catherine that she had spent years seeking validation through her romantic connections, had believed that if she could win the Duke back, it would prove something about her worth and value. She told Catherine that she had come to understand that this was a delusion, that no romantic connection could ever provide what she had been seeking, that she needed to find worth and value within herself. She told Catherine that she was grateful for the clarity that the wedding day had provided. She told Catherine that she was grateful for the Duke's kindness, even in the face of her manipulation. She told Catherine that she was grateful for Catherine's strength in standing firm rather than walking away. She asked Catherine if she could be forgiven. Catherine, who had spent months processing her own emotions about Victoria's appearance at the wedding, was able to respond with genuine compassion. She told Victoria that she had already forgiven her. She told Victoria that she understood that Victoria had been motivated by pain rather than by cruelty. She told Victoria that she hoped Victoria would find her way forward and would discover that she was worthy of love and respect regardless of her romantic status. She told Victoria that the movement she and the Duke had established was actually designed in part to help women like Victoria, women who had been taught to seek their value through romantic connection, and who needed to be helped to find value within themselves. Victoria was moved by Catherine's response. She became, over time, one of the most significant advocates for the movement that Catherine and the Duke had established. She became proof that people could change, that understanding could develop, that the trauma of difficult moments could be transformed into something meaningful. Years passed. The Duke's marriage to Catherine became known as one of the great partnerships of their era. They worked together to implement reforms. They raised children who inherited their parents' commitment to challenging society's narrow expectations. They built a life that transcended the drama of the wedding day and that instead became a testament to what was possible when two people genuinely loved each other and when they used their power and privilege to create positive change. The Duke had arrived at his wedding prepared to marry the woman he loved. Victoria's appearance in a wedding dress had threatened to destroy that moment. But instead of destroying it, the moment had been transformed into something far more significant. It had become the moment when the Duke proved his commitment to Catherine. It had become the moment when Catherine demonstrated her strength and her understanding. It had become the moment when the truth was articulated that some things could not be changed by external manipulation or dramatic gestures. It had become the moment when a man and a woman chose each other fully and completely, knowing the full weight of their histories and the full weight of the consequences of their choice. Years after both the Duke and Catherine had died, the story of the wedding day would still be told. It would be told as a story of love overcoming obstacles. It would be told as a story of a woman fighting for her place in a man's life. It would be told as a story of a man choosing his future over his past. It would be told, ultimately, as a story about what was possible when people were brave enough to be authentic and when they were committed to building something meaningful rather than to winning the approval of society. The Duke had married the woman he loved. Victoria's appearance in a wedding dress had not changed that outcome. It had only demonstrated that true love was not easily destroyed, and that commitment built on genuine affection and mutual respect could weather any storm that society or circumstance might create. The lessons that emerged from that wedding day would extend far beyond the immediate circumstances. They would influence an entire generation's understanding of love and partnership. They would challenge people's assumptions about what marriage should be and what women's value in society should be based upon. They would, in short, create ripples that extended far beyond anything the Duke or Catherine could have anticipated when they spoke their vows in that cathedral on that extraordinary afternoon.